Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal here, stand-up comic, host of the Rush Hour podcast. I am so excited. Today's guest is a Norwegian journalist and entertainment reporter, a very successful YouTuber, and she's been reporting from the epicenter of the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds lawsuits. It's Kjersti Flaa. How are you?
Perfect. That was great pronunciation. Thank you, Dave. I'm so happy to be on your show.
I care about these things. It's whenever I have like a German guest on, I'm like, oh boy, I've got some words to learn. Thanks for doing the show today. How's everything going?
Of course. Yeah, it's going well. I mean, there's so much going on, as you know. I'm trying to keep, myself updated on everything. And people keep sending me messages and like, did you see this? Did you hear this? So yeah, regarding Blake Lively and the Justin Baldoni drama, I mean, that's why we're here.
Right, we're in that sort of the he said, she said, and there's a lot of misinformation on TikTok and people just sharing, crazy clickbait, and there's even artificial intelligence you have to sift through. So we have an old saying here, and maybe this, I don't know where this saying originated, but it's don't become the story. It's for journalists that if you're part of the story, something happened. Now you are in the center of this story, not your fault. But you went super viral with a video called The Blake Lively Interview that made me want to quit my job. 6.5 million views and growing. Can you walk me through what led up to that moment? Do you just do these, do you get a phone call to do these press junkets? Like, how does it even work that you get into the interview room?
Yeah, so, whenever there's a new movie out, I've been doing these interviews for Norwegian television and German television mostly. And so whenever there's a new movie out, the distributor of the movie will contact a journalist, or they will contact a publication or a TV show directly and ask if you are interested in interviewing the talents for the movie to help promote the movie. And I've been working for at that time, at least I was working for a TV show in Norway, like a very entertainment celebrity-based TV show, not so much like film TV show. So I was invited to New York. I was living in New York at the time, actually, to interview Blake Lively and Parker Posey and Kristen Stewart and the director Paul Feig for, no, sorry, that wasn't Paul Feig movie. It was a Woody Allen movie. And Kristen Stewart. So I was invited to interview them in New York. And so I did. And I sat down and, as you know, it started off a little rough and it didn't get any better from there.
But as a journalist, right, the first thing you want to do is build rapport. It's because it's kind of the same thing with stand-up comedy. You get on stage, you want to talk to people. So you just say something nice about a very obvious pregnant woman. I mean, you've been around doing this for a long time.
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump?
You've got two nice ones.
And they are kind of bumps, aren't they?
No, not bumps. The lovely lady lumps. Check it out.
In the moment, did that feel like, oh, this is one of those things? Like, does it feel like, oh, I'm doing Blake Lively a favor by even being here? Like, what was the general feeling when she kind of snapped back at you?
Well, you know what? I was really surprised by that. As you say, it was like an icebreaker. It was so obvious that she was pregnant. She was sitting there, I think she was almost 8 months, and it was all public knowledge. She was wearing a very fitted dress, so you could see the bump.
Yeah,
she's not allowed to call it the bump. I don't know.
She's not first trimester. And this new world we live in, I'm sure you're not supposed to assume anyone's pregnant, but she's a celebrity. She's pregnant.
Yeah, we knew she was pregnant. So I just said, congrats on your little bump. Now I've heard later people are saying that you shouldn't say little bump because that's referring to someone's body and she's pregnant. But yeah, so, I'm from Norway. I've learned that saying and I thought that's a nice thing to say. And and I wasn't asking her about anything. I was just congratulating her. And then I remember my next question was not going to be about costumes because I never ask questions like that. I work for a celebrity-oriented TV show. They're not interested in the costumes. But the way that they reacted and the way Parker Posey was like, did you like the movie? I knew that I couldn't go where I was going to go with my conversation. So I was just like, yeah, those costumes were great. Can you talk about them? And even that became like a trigger. It's
don't they realize, as much as you want to talk about the movie, you have to get you have to do your job and try to make something that's got a headline attached to it. Yeah, maybe you ask about something else in the news with them. Like you're in the end, you have a mutual sort of goal here, which is to get publicity.
Thank you for saying that, because that is so important in these situations. There are so many different interests at play, because I come in as a journalist. I'm invited as a journalist, and I am approved for the TV show I work for, which is like a celebrity based TV show. And then you have the publicist of the talents, and they're just interested in their talents looking amazing and being liked by the audience that's going to watch it. And then you have the studio, who's only interested in pushing the movie. And then you have the celebrity, who sometimes doesn't want to be there. So, everyone has their own interest coming into this room. And, I'm there to do a job. Everyone's there to do a job, though. And we all know how this works, basically. So when people are sabotaging like that, I have to say that's happened very rarely. But this time it was like, wow.
Well, when I see this sort of privilege that happens, I think it's from people that didn't experience the struggle of being an actor. Like I started acting in New York City, and my roommates would all get up at 4 a.m. to go wait in line to audition for the Actors Equity Project because there'd be a line around the block. I used to do background work on Gossip Girl for $108 a day, and you would see her, and to give her grace, maybe it's a winter scene and she's dressed, and she's frozen, and maybe she's even memorizing her lines so she looks miserable. I try to give all the grace, but to think, oh my gosh, the amount of money they're making, and not realizing, sorry, part of the job is you got to promote the film too. And then what we noticed within the sort of like court, like infighting, was that she was refusing to do the job of promoting. Also, like she was using that as leverage. She was refusing to show up to set unless the contingencies, which would be normal if they had violated, her boundaries, but we're still kind of trying to figure that out. So yeah, it's like, you're just doing your job. And I think the audience has so much empathy for you, because you're not, there are instances where a journalist asks like real inappropriate questions, to try to get something out of that. This was so far away from that. So I think the audience immediately was like, all right, we're on your side for sure.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, the way that they kind of made me feel like I was a sexist for asking about the costumes, I was just sitting there. At that point, when they started just talking back and forth to each other and completely ignoring me, I was just sitting there, and I was just like feeling like, is this really happening right now? Are they actually doing this? And the further it went along, the more I started feeling this kind of like rage and sadness and like all these emotions inside. And I was just like, oh my God, I just want to leave this room as soon as possible. And it was a really rough experience, I have to say. It was you walk out of there and you feel terrible. And then you're like, why don't they like me? Why were they like that to me? You start questioning yourself and blaming yourself. Like,
and that's what's so sad with like with victims, right? Is that, well, this isn't some crazy big experience. It's like a micro victim of like just like a shitty day, right? And usually the victim wants to doesn't share because they feel like it's their own problem. But what we learned was, when you finally did share this, everyone's like, oh yeah, we're on your team. So did you call your boss and say, we can't air this? Like, what kept you from airing it in the first place? And what was your final decision to just upload the thing?
So they did actually air it in Norway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they did do a story on it online, like Blake Lively being rude to our journalists.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yeah, no, but it didn't go anywhere from there. And the thing is, I had uploaded an interview before on YouTube where some actress wasn't very nice to me. And then the distributor called me and said, you should probably take that down, because you'd never know what can come from these things. And, the publicist of this person could just blacklist you, because it's always been the journalist's fault when these things happen.
Sure,
And
you're a tool for them. You're just a tool for them, at least in their opinion.
Yeah, and also, from the fans' point of view, I think we've seen a shift now that people are a little like, okay, we're a little tired of these celebrities being so entitled and have big egos and stepping on others. So I think that's what happened here as well, that people were starting to see that, oh, okay, this is not, you can't do that just because you're a celebrity. You can't treat people like that. So the reason why I didn't post it back then when it happened was because I knew that I could jeopardize my job if I did, and people would probably come out and troll me on social media and say like, you were a terrible journalist, because that that was usually what used to happen in these instances.
So
So
take us to 5 months ago. That's when you uploaded the video
yeah.
around then. So obviously there was already rumors going on. You didn't just decide to upload this video, although you were accused of being part of the smear campaign. So what was that like? Tell me the day. Did it take off right away? What were you shocked? Had you had any videos start to get that sort of pop in the algorithm before?
Well, so I watched the movie on August 5th. I checked that in my emails because I was invited to a press screening. I just came back from a long vacation. So I have to say, I was not updated with anything going on in Hollywood. I was a month in Spain, and then I was in Norway, and I was just like completely checked out. So this was the first press screening this summer. And I was like, okay, well, let's go and see it. So I went to see the movie with my boyfriend, and we were like, ugh, I didn't like the movie at all. Honestly, I thought it was not for me. I thought it was like, what's going on here? It's so much of Blake Lively's hair everywhere. I felt it was a movie about her hair. And I was like, I thought it was very cliche. And then it turned into this kind of like domestic violence movie, which was like such a surprise to me because the buildup wasn't like that at all. Anyways, so we were talking in the car back, and I was like, oh my God, I remember that terrible interview I had with Blake Lively. And my boyfriend also interviewed Blake Lively and had a terrible experience with her. Yes, I put that video on my YouTube channel where she was pushing like her husband's gin on him during the interview. So he had to drink and finish up a cocktail of
That was your
right.
boyfriend. Okay, I did see that. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, yeah, you can check that out. So she was basically promoting his gin during the whole interview. So let's put it that way. I didn't have any good experiences with Blake Lively. And then some reporter from Norway called me and was like, we're doing a segment on censorship in Hollywood and how, some of these interviews with celebrities have been censored, including one that they did. And so they interviewed me about that. And I talked about this Blake Lively interview, which wasn't confiscated, which was really a surprise to me because I was like, they let that interview slide. They didn't take it from me because, they do that all the time. They take journalists interview all the time because they don't want it to come out.
You mean like they'll just be like, give us the memory card? We're not.
Yes. So usually before when I did these interviews, they would give you a memory card with the interview on at the end of the day.
So you're at like a press junket. You like show up, and then they have control of the media, whether they distribute it to you or not.
Yes. So they have hired the camera teams. So they, they're in control of everything.
And so in this instance, is it like 15 journalists and you guys all take your rounds interviewing them?
Yeah, probably more like 40 journalists.
Like, so I get the idea that they could be annoyed, but like, man up, like do your job.
I know. The thing is, people are just saying, oh, she's tired or whatever. But the thing is, we as journalists, we are often sitting waiting for like 5 hours to get our interviews. And no one says like, oh my God, you must be tired. I understand why you're being like this. It's just like everyone has to just like, act. Yeah. And they're actors. You can act nice.
Yeah, exactly. She's proven she's a good actor. I'm one of those types when people like to smear her. I'm like, no, she's in the A-list category because we know her name. She's done big things. Call her. She's not A+ list, but she's in that list, right? So, for you to get that footage back, you've just had this. Did you have to like when your boyfriend was like, oh, I had a bad experience too. Did you have to like go look for it? And then what was the decision?
I have all my interviews very organized. So I have them. And I was saying to him, I'm like, should I just post that interview? I hadn't posted anything on YouTube for a long time. And I was like, I've kind of checked out of Hollywood. So I was like, I don't care if people cancel me. I wanted to put my interview out. And the thing is, I did not know about any of the controversy. People don't want to believe it, but it's the truth. I didn't know about anything before 2 days after I had posted my interview. Another journalist sent me a link to a TikTok video where someone was making fun of Blake Lively and wear your florals and and I was like, oh, there's more people who had a bad experience with Blake Lively. And that's when I started looking into all the things happening. And then it took about 3 days before my video or my interview with her went viral. And that's when all the press started contacting me and like, oh my God, you have a comment about this. And I was like, well, Yeah, and I wasn't expecting it to get so much attention at all. And I was not expecting people to be so supportive of me. That was a really amazing, overwhelming experience. And yeah, I did not expect that.
That's so interesting because, and by the way, I think the best career moves are when you do tell Hollywood, like, fuck it,
Yeah.
because you get to be
Yeah.
like your true authentic self. And to have this moment where you were, I'm not saying it's like changing the path of your career, but I'm seeing your numbers. Like, this is huge. Like, you're getting more views than these entertainment news channels are. You know what I mean? Like, you're more impactful than the people that are on the, all of the whatever, all the different entertainment news channels. And I just think it's incredible that your voice has risen up throughout all of this. And like,
Thank you.
while you're continuing to report like on all of the stories involving this, has it changed sort of your business plan moving forward on what you hope to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for saying that. I feel like I'm trying to be as honest and as transparent as possible. And I've been doing that the whole time through all of this. So when I was accused of being a part of the smear campaign, the first thing I did was go out and talk about it. In contrast to how most people in Hollywood react when something like that happens, they just hire a lawyer and sue someone. So I'm not a fan of that approach, and I don't think it's a good approach. But now, it's been so incredibly amazing. I have to say that I've got so many people on my YouTube channel and an audience and a community there that's just like, it's blowing my mind. I mean, every day when I wake up and I see all the comments, there's so many comments, there's so much engagement, there's so much support, there's so many nice people, I have to say. I am so, so grateful. And I love doing this. It's just so much nicer than having to pitch stories to newspapers. I was a writer as well, pitch stories to newspapers and magazines or TV shows. And, now I can
Yeah,
just
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
myself. It's
The
great.
creative control that have, and then the ability to move with the story on a moment's notice. Like, my wife knows if something hits when we're on a road trip, we're going to pull over and we're going to go live. Like, it's important.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't, the mainstream media can't compete with that. Now, my last question is about audience capture and the idea that when you gain an audience, presumably most of your audience is pro Justin Baldoni here. Does it change? And maybe this is just how it works with journalism. Like we all have our own bias, but like, do you feel as though you're shifting towards that mob's opinion, or is that just where the story's at? Because a lot of people moved to Blake's side when she sued him, and then they saw all of his evidence and they moved over to his side. And there is like this idea where people, you don't want to be labeled as like a, men's rights guy, or, there's always like something attached to you when you cover a story that might lean in one direction versus the other. So how do you, as a journalist, how do you sort of navigate all that?
Well, for me, it was a little different because I got dragged into this. I was mentioned in the New York Times article
Wow.
in a way that it seemed like I was a part of the alleged smear campaign. And for me, that was kind of, a trigger because I knew that they had planted that in the New York Times. The New York Times didn't contact me for to see if it had any, any validity. Um, and in
So
the
there was
law.
no journalistic confirming with you or getting a statement or any of
No,
that.
I contacted New York Times and they said that, oh, we can't change the article or update it in any way. Of course, they didn't want the liability of doing that, but we can add your statement. So they added my statement that I had nothing to do with it, but that was 24 hours later.
Yeah.
So, people had already read it. And the thing is, in the lawsuit, my name is mentioned, but it is mentioned in in like a my English words sometimes. It's mentioned in reference to an article that puts Blake in a bad light. It's not referenced in any way that I had any part of an alleged smear campaign. But they did insinuate that so strongly in the New York Times article that people believed it.
Or even
And
worse, that you were like used as a pawn. Like,
yes,
that's like
completely.
as if you don't have agency as a journalist who's been in the game for a long time.
Exactly. And that's when, for me, when I saw the way that they did that in the article, I was like, I don't know what to believe in this article because I knew that what they did to me was false information. So I was like, how much of this can I actually trust? I mean, I had to give her the benefit of the doubt. I was like, okay, if something happened like this, is the way they describe it, that's horrible, but I want to see more receipts before I take any sides here. And of course, people came after me for that, for saying that, like, oh, you don't believe another woman, and you're a woman, and that's terrible, and all these things. And I'm like, well, I don't think we should believe every woman by default, because a lot of women lie, a lot of men lie, but
Sure.
also I don't think we should disbelieve every man by default. I
Yeah,
think
like
we need to
you
see
believe.
both sides.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
believe but if there's something at stake, then you need to verify. And what's at stake here is your reputation as a journalist. So,
exactly.
and I'm the same way, where a lot of people actually think I'm too Team Blake. And I go, well, listen, you have to understand, as a man who's covering this story, I need to make sure I'm going to be as fair as possible, because I've done this before and I've been put on these lists where
Mm.
I'm accused of being something that I'm not. So it's
Yeah.
like, just
It's
people
risky
have,
for everyone. It's like, because you're a man, you can't talk about it. Because you're a woman, you can't talk about it. It's just a trap. And I
yeah.
think people need to grow up a little bit and do some research. And like you're saying, there's so much misinformation out there. People are just like spreading all these crazy rumors. And I found a video of this big YouTuber who actually was the one who said he found the connection between me and Blake Lively's crisis team. And I found that video where he's sitting talking about it, how he went through my channel and he found I published an interview with Johnny Depp during the trial of between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and then I hashtagged it "Justice for Johnny Depp," and that made him believe that I was working for the crisis team, because Johnny Depp used the same crisis team as Justin Baldoni, and then he was like, slam dunk. And the thing is, they used that as a source in the New York Times article. They said, oh, she had hashtagged it. I mean, it's just insane to me. And I have to
Yeah.
say, as a journalist, that was just so disappointing to me that the New York Times did something like that, because I trusted the New York Times. I was always the one like, oh, when people are talking about misinformation and fake news and, mainstream media, I was like, I'm a journalist. There's no such thing. But now I've experienced it myself, and I think it's really sad and very upsetting.
Yeah, it's not conspiratorial. It's like mainstream media is dying to an extent because of the ad model, and everything doesn't really work out. So they see entertainment reporters probably as lesser than, which is like, totally, you're showing more authenticity and more journalistic integrity than anybody. So look, if they think you're some Norwegian spy, maybe she is, we don't know.
Yeah.
But if you are, I want a good Norwegian spy on my side. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
We're going to continue this conversation on your channel. I want my audience to know
Yes.
that. So we'll leave it there, and people can go check out your channel. There'll be a link below, and you can go click on her. But thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you, Dave. It was lovely to talk to you. And I've been following you as well, and all your interesting takes on things. And you're one of those people who are not like, jumping into any conclusions, which I think is really good in this case. So yeah, thank you.
Of course. We'll talk to you soon.